Hey, good evening, everyone. I'm so excited. I wish I had followed this sooner. This was posted recently on GMT website, and I got it in my email update, so I'm not quite sure the exact day this came out. But I wanted to share with you that GMT and Jim Day, they're finally working on releasing MBT, which just giddy. This is exciting. This is a cover of what the old game looks like, and I'm going to share with you why this is so exciting that MBT is now being updated, reworked, and is going to be reprinted in a new format. So let me tell you why this is so cool. When I was in high school, I was probably 15, 16, somewhere in there. This came out in '89. So I don't think I got this the year it came out. I probably picked it up in 90, 91. Okay, so this is bringing back fond memories here when I was younger. So I remember that, yeah, I was 15, 16, somewhere in there, okay? And I remember I used to live in Spokane, Washington. And the first time I saw this was at a store called the White Elephant. Okay, so if you're in Spokane, Washington, they have on Division Street, and I guess there's one out on Sprague, but on Division Street, there's this store called the White Elephant. Now, the White Elephant is actually, let's see if I can go back here to the main thing. You wouldn't think that it would have toys and board games and stuff. It's actually a store that's got camping and hunting and fishing gear and things like that. It has like everything that you would think of for outdoors life. But in the back, it had this huge toy section with trains and models and board games and GI Joes and all kinds of fun stuff. Like, going to the White Elephant was awesome, and the prices were always really, really good too. And so that's where I encountered a lot of Euro games and things that I had never seen before. And MBT, let's come on back to it. Where's it at here? Oh, I lost my picture. Here it is. And I saw this, and which was awesome because I loved Army stuff. You know, I was 15, 16. I had spent a lot of time in elementary school going to the school library and finding books on World War II and looking at tanks and things, and that just followed with me for years and years. And then as I was getting older, you know, I was more interested in more military, modern stuff, Russian equipment, T-72s, Abrams tanks, things of that nature, the modern stuff. And when I saw this, I thought, wow, this is awesome, a game that lets me play these things. Well, little did I know that it was like what I thought at the time was like a hardcore war game. So I remember it being cheap too. I don't remember what I paid for it, but I mean, I was 15. I didn't have a job. I was in high school, and my parents gave me allowance. You know, I was that kind of kid, and I remember picking it up. So it must not have been too much, because I guarantee they would not have let me buy a board game if it had a $50, $60 price tag on it. So this was reasonably priced. Either that or the White Elephant just reasonably priced it for me. So I picked it up, and I remember taking it home and opening it up. And here on the Board Game Geek, they got a bunch of pictures, which just as I flip through, wow, really brings back the memories on what the data charts looked like. I remember pulling stuff like this out and going, wow. You know, just chart after chart. Not too dissimilar from Panzer, but, you know, spotting ranges, line of sight charts, you know, just really into, you know, just, oh my goodness, you know, look at all this data. So for someone who never, ever played a war game before in their life, this, quite honestly, was pretty daunting. But I did have a friend that was willing to play it with me. And what was cool was, this is back, I guess, when things were much cheaper than they are now. I went down to a place, this is in Spokane, called Merlin's, and I think it's still there. If this is their current website, it's a terrible looking website, but the store was amazing. I loved it. Went there, comics, board games, all kinds of stuff, and they used to carry a lot of pewter miniatures. Yeah, I'm like looking here. The website's making me kind of nauseous to look at, but the store itself was super awesome. And I remember going there, and they had a display case in the back that had like all their pewter miniatures for like D&D, all the cool gaming stuff at the time. And this is back when the pewter miniatures weren't necessarily done by a company. They were just done, well, they were done by companies, but it wasn't like, Wizards of the Coast branded miniatures or Reaper. This was just, folks who had like their own, molds and stuff, and just sold these things by the dozens. And so they were really cheap to buy miniatures back in the day. And micro armor was also pretty cheap. So I remember I went to White Elephant, got me MBT, took the time to read the basic rules, because it does break down to like break down to basic, advanced, and then optional. So I read the basic rules on moving and shooting and using the armor charts and stuff. And I went to Merlin's and I bought some GHQ micro armor. I'm assuming it was GHQ, but I remember whoever it was a bunch of tanks that were Abrams and T-72s, or they could have been T-80s. They're small, it's hard to tell. But they pretty much can double for anything Russian at the time. So I bought a whole bunch of tanks and stuff, and I remember playing with miniatures on the geomorphic boards they had, because they had these boards that you could lay out, and they were good quality boards too. I don't know if this has any pictures of the boards. Yeah, like here's a picture of the board. So these came on like a really thick, well, I thought, for me, it was a thick board. It wasn't like those, the flimsy paper map boards that you get now. Board game and printing and stuff, it just seems so ridiculously expensive. You pay like $100, you get the box, but it's paper maps, and it's just, so underwhelming for the price that you pay sometimes. And I look back at some of the classics where they got like these really cool map boards. They're thick, sturdy. These are so much, I think, better looking than the current maps they're printing now for Panzer. So I'm hoping that the new MBT that they're doing has maps that have color, something like this. They're not dull like Panzer. So I'm hoping we get some really nice looking maps that come on some kind of actual board, and not just the weird torn in half, oddly folded geomorphic maps that come in the Panzer Expansion 2 and 3. But like some really nice boards, and even if they don't immediately, I would still like to see maybe a P500 where we can get some mounted map boards. But the game came with some really nice stuff. So anyway, that was my first introduction really to wargaming a long time ago. And then after I graduated high school, I moved on to other things, joined the Army, and then I never really gamed again until many years later. So this was my gateway. I never played advanced rules or optional rules. Like I said, we just played enough to know mountains blocked line of sight. You needed to get a good line on somebody, and then compared your armor penetration value with the armor they have, and so on and so forth. But it was super fun. So some things that I remember reading about this game later down the road, because it didn't have the internet at the time, or very little, but you didn't have forums and things back in the early 90s. You could get on the internet, but it wasn't like you can now. So this was actually probably years later when kind of reading up on some things about MBT, IDF, or the old Yakinto Panzer versions and things, was armor predictions and values that Jim Day uses in his games. So I didn't know at the time. I just looked at this as a game of data, charts and things. And so I never really understood that Mr. Day did a lot of research gathering technical data, and, I'm not even quite sure how he gets all of his information. So, I understand he's done a lot of research, so we'll leave it at that, because I don't want to assume his research methods into this. So there were things that come about from the game that probably had a lot of folks who doubted his accuracy and details or his armor values for certain things. So you could say maybe there was some controversy there. So his MBT game came out, and with a lot of printed values, it pretty much certain vehicles were much more overpowering than, say, their equivalent take on the other side. So to put it bluntly, Abrams tanks can really trounce on, say, T-62s, T-55s, things of that nature. And to a lesser extent, M1A1 that's in the game is pretty darn powerful compared to other tanks in the game. I'll just put it like that without pulling up data cards and explaining everything. But essentially, Mr. Day had the Allied equipment much more powerful to a certain degree than, say, the Warsaw Pact Force versions. And it turns out that all his research and a lot of what the folks were doubting turned out to be fairly accurate. So I have some stories to share. So here I am in high school, and 91 comes around, and I'm about to be a senior, and the Gulf War breaks out. And, that was pretty important in our day. I remember the first Gulf War. The newspapers had full spreads of war, and I mean it was a very, very big thing. And as the war progressed and started to come to a close, there was actually quite a few game companies that put out gaming materials about the Gulf War. I remember I bought a GDW. No, it wasn't. Yeah, GDW. They put out a book about the Gulf War. It had troop strengths and TONEs and different things. It was very interesting to read up on the different equipment. And if you follow GMT Games like Twilight 2000, they used a very distinctive art style of like taking photographs and making them into pencil drawings and line drawings. They always had these really cool pictures that they came up with. And so I just remember this book having pictures of, T-55s, T-62s, and just all these different vehicles and Abrams tanks and Bradleys. And it just really, really drew me into the fascination with modern military equipment. And the Gulf War showed that, just to put it mildly, that Allied equipment completely trounced the Warsaw Pact counterparts. Okay, so that's how I perceived it. Because that's the data we show is, the road of death and how Abrams tanks just drove on through, just pop, 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 popping everything. Very few casualties or tanks blown up on the Allied side. That's what was presented to me growing up. And that's what I saw reflected in the game as I would go back and compare data cards and things like that. I was like, wow, he nailed it. And that's the impression I had growing up with MBT compared to what I saw in the real world with what he predicted in his game or, his research showed in the game. Okay, that's putting it very simplistically from a 16, 17-year-old point of view. Okay, so just take that for what it's worth. That's what I was kind of figured on my own. Okay, now so much later, ungame related, this was probably back in 2001. I worked at an electronics company, and I had a friend who came from the Ukraine over to the United States, and he did his compulsory service in the Ukraine, and we would have conversation. We would talk shop, and then we would talk about our service time, and it was interesting because talking to him, Warsaw Pact equipment would annihilate anything on the American side. And it was interesting because when I went through the Army, we spent a lot of time training to fight Soviet equipment, T-80s and Hind helicopters and all this stuff. That's what I grew up with. Those were the bad vehicles, T-72s and things like that. And then when he went through service, he grew up learning how to destroy Abrams and shoot down Apaches and stuff. So we got to talk to each other about completely, opposite sides of the coin. And so talking to him, I started to form new opinions. So the equipment in the Gulf War wasn't necessarily top of the line Russian equipment. And you figured that the men operating that equipment had come off of these long wars with like Iran. Iraq's been fighting for long time before the first Gulf War happened. And so a lot of those people on the Iraqi side were tired, and they weren't, motivated. Whereas the Allied forces are these young men. They haven't been fighting for decades, and then they're fresh and motivated with, all this high-tech equipment. It's comparing two totally different armies against each other. So when I talked to my friend who came from the Ukraine, I think a big difference would have happened with the training and the troops that you're facing and how they use the equipment. And I think that's an argument that's been brought up before. So it's not just me saying that, but I didn't come to that realization until I talked to somebody who was a professional soldier in one of the countries that made and trained in that very equipment that we would face. And so it got me thinking, how accurate would MBT be if we really actually had a World War III where we could compare combat statistics of actual Russian troops using real good Russian tactics in Russian equipment that's top of the line and not stuff that they sold outside their own country, and put those top line units against the top line units of the Allied forces. How different would the war outcome have been? And then how accurate would his, Jim Day's game been kind of predicting these outcomes? So that's why I've always had this fascination with MBT, is because I grew up with it as a kid, and then as an adult it came back to me later in discussions that I had with my friend who came from a differing military background. But it really made me think, oh my goodness, how would this game hold up today? All right, so that's just thoughts that I've had over the years. And then recently, sure enough, GMT now is finally working on, with Jim Day, they're updating MBT now to his new streamlined system. Now, I still don't have a World War III at the Fulda Gap and Eisenbach Gap and all that stuff that I can compare his game data to real world scenarios and see how that would play out. Because even if people made Gulf War scenarios, it's still going to be really, really one-sided. So the game data presented for the actual, Soviet equipment, the Warsaw Pact of the time, because this is going back to 1987, and that was like the Warsaw Pact at the time. So to compare NATO equipment and the Warsaw Pact is still going to be somewhat hypothetical, because those top-of-line units never actually fought each other. All right? So this is still a very much a source of interest for me. So it has history from my youth, and now it's coming back, but it still leaves those questions for me of how accurate is the data going to play out. Okay, so let's set that aside. Okay, let's set aside the comparisons to the real world and just talk about the game. So why am I excited that they're updating this? Because I never played Yakinto Panzer, but I've put out a lot of Panzer videos, his new series, and I absolutely love it. The data cards still have a lot of detail. There's still a lot of charts and things you can look up to simulate the game. And the components look great compared to the original. And so there's already a bunch of sample data stuff out here for me to look at. So for example, on the Consim World forum page, there's actually a section in their Cold War Gaming forums, and they've got a MBT IDF, Israeli Defense Force section, and in here people are already discussing about this reprint for MBT. And here they have some samples of potentially not final productive items, but some sample pictures coming up of some equipment. So here's like a T-80, and here's what a new data card looks like. And this is the same format of the World War II game. And so this is why I love it. It really brings his entire game system spanning from World War II to modern day. So I can't wait till they put in IDF to maybe capture some of the 70s conflicts. And then what would be cool is if he can release a Korean Vietnam. It might be a much smaller expansion because tank warfare happened, but not on the scale of like World War II. But it would be neat if he could release kind of that post-World War II, pre-70, something that kind of covers some of the 50s and 60s. That would be kind of neat too. But so he's almost got, a good 50 years of gaming or so he can cover, or more in the future. But anyway, this data chart really encompasses and follows the style of the World War II stuff. So like I was looking at stats, like there's point blank, short range, medium range, long range, extreme range. Well, in some of the World War II data cards, extreme range goes out to like 21 hexes. Here I've got 36, and this is on a T-80. penetration values. You can go back to the World War II stat cards and you'll see penetration values of like 9, you know. And so you look here, this has got like 108. So yeah, if you stuck your T-80 back into some sort of weird, because I had this dream too, what if I took an Abrams back to World War II? What would that be like? It'd be hell for whoever went up against this M1. Well, same here. The values, the system is the same, but the values reflect modern technologies. So your T-80 would tear up anything from World War II, but it's going to be on par with like Abrams and stuff. So what's neat is you have all the data for armor here at the bottom. So like level shots, rising shots, falling shots, kinetic energy shots, or chemical energy, like if it's a heat round, their AA gun that it might have, general purpose fire from the cannon. The Songster missile is modeled here. APF SDS, you know, armor piercing, fin stabilized, discarding sabot shots. You know, all of that data is put here on the card in a nice compact view. And I wanted to show you why I think that's cool. Here's the example. Here, let's do this real quick. Here's the new Abrams. This is the new style right here. This is the M1A1 Abrams. I'm not going to compare stats today. I'm just showing you kind of the new card layout. This is the same type of layout he uses with the new Panzer II Edition. All the information is on a nice card. I can't blow that up anymore. That's just the picture I have. But it's like a 4x6. I don't know the exact size. It's not a 3x5. It's not super big, but it's like the next size up from a 3x5 size of card. They're really nice size. They're thick, but all the data you need is there. Now compare that with the old M1 Abrams. This like took up a sheet. Now the difference being this included movement information here. A lot of the chart information was replicated on the vehicle chart, so you didn't have to keep flipping through all every different charts, which is nice, but there's no real consistency between the data cards. Some data cards you could fit like maybe 2 on a page, and then some of these like the Abrams took like a whole page. So there was no real good consistent look between the data cards. And when you're presented with this, it's like, oh, what a headache. There's just so much data. But what's nice is it's not that the game has gotten easier or dumbed down, but what he's done is he has made the charts and the game data more efficient. Like here's data charts down here which shows your whole front, turret rear, turret front, from the side, or did you shoot it from the front or the back. All of that is still on the main chart, but what he did was he's removed like the movement cost chart and possibly this hit location chart, and so really you're kind of left with the meat and potatoes, summarized equipment cost type of stuff, just the combat chart for the, you know, the penetration values, and then the hit location, and it's all condensed down. So he took all of this data and all of it is presented the same stuff. I still have turret front, turret rear. If I'm from the side, I have turret side. So all the armor values are still there. All the combat data is still there. It's just presented in a cleaner layout. It's beautiful, I think. And then the counter art. All right, so if we look back here at the GMT, let's see if they have a counter sheet here. Because I'm a big thing about counters and how pretty stuff looks. So let's just see if I can find a counter sheet. These counters are probably, I don't want to say on par, but really this is kind of typical for a lot of games I've seen where they're kind of black. These are nice line drawings and they show a lot of detail, but no color. They're kind of drab. They're not really anything that just stands out. But what I like is it has the unit number and then like a counter number. So if you're doing like hidden movement and stuff like that, you can write down your counter number. So they present the vehicle. Well, now that I'm looking back at it, they're pretty good line drawings, I had to admit. But what he's doing now, or like he's not the artist, but the style they're going with is these colored versions. And so you still get your top-down view, but now you get to see like actual camouflage patterns used of the vehicle. Let's go back and take a look at a sample counter. So here's what the counter will look like. Well, let me click the link. I broke the internet. Let me refresh. I broke it. There we go. Oh, that's so tiny you can't see. I wish I could zoom in. You'll have to go to the GMT website yourself. But instead of just a black line drawing, it's still a line drawing, but it's colorized in with the camouflage, so it matches the art on the data card. So they are prettier to look at. Now I have to admit, what you see here in the picture doesn't necessarily match what's on the actual counter when it comes out. And when I played just the Panzer game, the World War II game, the counters do look really pretty. They're nice. But I know some people aren't happy with that. Some people prefer more older traditional line drawing. But everything from the game is being updated. Graphics, the data card information that's being presented. But it's that core consistency of the second edition rule set that seems to be going throughout all the series. And what's nice is that tells me is that I'll be able to get this, pick it up, and there will be a small learning curve going from World War II mindset to a modern day. So like for example here, this has an extreme range of 40 hexes. And like some of the, like just off the top of my head, I think some of the Tiger tanks from World War II game had like an extreme range of 21 hexes. They had like point blank of 3 hexes. This has point blank of 7. So weaponry is definitely much more effective in the newer age. Now that brings up my next thing, maps. Okay, I saw that as a question on Consim World. What kind of maps are we going to get? And Jim Day said, hey, have you not seen the maps from Panzer? There's going to be lots of open terrain. So here's my hope. A, that the artwork is better. So yeah, go ahead, give us some open lanes and open fields of fire to take advantage of 40 hexes, but don't make such ugly maps. And don't make them the type of maps that come with the slit and they're kind of narrow. You would have to see the maps. There are probably pictures on Board Game Geek, and I know I've done in some of my video reviews, showed you the maps. I don't like the geomorphic maps that they provided in Expansion 2 and Expansion 3. But I would like to see some nicer geomorphic maps that maybe come on some really nice thick card stock. They're not just like flimsy paper. I hope they make better maps. The data cards will be great, the counters will be great, but the maps, gotta improve the maps in order for us to take advantage of all this new, ranges and things like that. Because 40 hexes, if you parked a tank in the middle of the map, he could reach all edges of the board. Easy. And if you're playing on a couple geomorphic maps, you could probably sit on one edge of the map and shoot clear across. One thing they did with the old MBT was they put lots of forests and lots of mountains. You had to maneuver to get shots on your opponent. But now, if they make the same type of maps that they have now, there's not going to be a lot of ranges or spots that take advantage of 40 hexes. So I hope they put a lot of good thought into their maps and have spots that do require some maneuvering, and then maybe some spots that have open things. Because otherwise it's going to be pretty boring if I just sit at one edge of the map, or the first person to reach the center has full command of the battlefield and can just pick shots off because they can hit all edges. It's a lot to think about. The only other thing I want to talk about is infantry. That's the last thing I'm going to talk about, and then I'll let you go because this is more. I'm excited. Okay, but let me talk about infantry. I was not happy with infantry rules in Panzer. They work. I have infantry. They do awesome at guarding and defending locations and digging in and waiting for stuff to come so they can spring ambushes. They're just not fun for me. I really like the tanks and the on-field gun assets and stuff, but just straight up infantry squads, yeah, I can transport them, drop them off. They're great for taking and holding objectives and moving into a forest. It's just not... I have not figured out how to enjoy infantry, okay, because they don't seem as dynamic to the game as I would like. Usually when I play a scenario, I still look for tank-heavy scenarios because the tanks are super, super fun to play with. But I think that's going to be different in MBT because now when you get your infantry, they have missiles. So now your infantry carry a heavy bite. You know, I haven't looked to see what exactly hardware infantry will have here, and I don't quite know how. I know this says 1987, so I don't know exactly what all hardware they're going to have, so I don't know when javelins came out or different things, but I know we've had different weapon systems leading up to 1987 that involved man portable stuff. Like it might be tow units, you know, tow 2 missiles, I think was back then. So we might not have javelins, but we'll have like some tow missiles, I'm pretty sure. So this gives your infantry a lot more punch, and I think they will actually be a lot more useful, because not only can you now drop them off and put them in a defensive position, but man, can they defend that position with some heavy artillery type stuff. Stinger missiles, you know, you can give a Humvee, a light skinned vehicle, pop on a tow launcher, and it's got mobility. Or you can put on like I'm not quite sure what kind of mobile Humvee type anti-air defense stuff they had back in '87. You know, I'd have to Google that. But there's things now you can give infantry that you really couldn't do with the old Panzer game that really makes infantry deadly. Because those were things we learned how to do when I was in the Army, was, you know, to fight enemy tanks and things using stuff like missiles. I think the javelin system probably came out in the 90s, because I remember we got to watch a video. We're like, well, that's really cool. We'll never see it. And we never did, but it was awesome. You know, now it's pretty prevalent, but it was new when I came out. So yeah, we probably had tow 2s and stuff like that. But oh man, I can't wait to see infantry utilized here, especially if you throw in helicopters and Blackhawks and stuff like that. So now you don't have to worry about your old, you know, German half-track pulling up somewhere back behind enemy lines, dropping off troops because they're going to get blown up easy. But now you've got, you know, either Soviet Hinds, you know, rushing in with troops and dropping them off, or, you know, you've got Blackhawks coming through, or late model Hueys and stuff, you know, doing mobile warfare. Infantry is going to have a much bigger impact in MBT, I think, than it does in the other Panzer games, and I think this is really going to help people have a full spectrum war, because now you're going to have much more deadly artillery, much more deadly aircraft, helicopters, mobile infantry, infantry with a punch, plus high-tech vehicles, T-80s, you know, Abrams vehicles, M1s, M1A1s, M1 improved, you know, the IPs, you know, or M1Ps, just so much good stuff. I think this is going to be a great game. And if you go to GMT, let's see if we can see oh, did I close it? Yeah, I sure did. Let's go to GMT Games real quick, team. GMT Games, P500, Panzer series. Like I said, don't know when it released, but they're already up to 229, and I don't think this is but a few days old as of March 31st. I don't know when this came out onto their P500 list, but it's already got, what did I say there, about 200 and some odd. Let's take a look. 229 pre-orders, plus they've already also have in the works the Germans and the British armed expansions to give you even more vehicles to play with. So you'll have a full NATO stuff going on here pretty soon. So they're already putting the expansions out, and they've already got quite a few pre-orders down. So check this out. Come look at the different sample counters and things like that. Get a feel for the game. You can definitely check out the rule book from Panzer, because it's got living rules, And I think obviously there's going to be some differences because, World War II and modern, but it kind of would give you a feel for the structure and layout of the book because it's going to have basic rules, advanced rules, optional rules. I really don't see him changing the formula from what he's got. He has a system that's adaptable from World War II to modern. So really the changes I see mostly will be in maybe artillery resolution because we have different types of artillery, fast scam, and all kinds of stuff like that. Then he's going to include aircraft rules, like seriously include aircraft rules because we have so much more advanced aircraft. Tornadoes, F-15s, F-16s, things like that we can bring to the table, and then or whatever else you got on the Russian side, and then helicopters, Heinz and the HIP transports, and then you're going to have Black Hawks and Hueys, and I think even early model Apaches will be coming out around that time frame. So there is so much more to bring to the table too, that you're going to have a nice complete war game package right here, even without adding the 2 expansions. But if you add those 2 expansions, then you're going to have your time replicating that World War II or World War III experience of like the Fulda Gap or coming through to the Eisenbach Gap, that stuff there of the Soviet, the Warsaw Pact, the Bear coming across the German border, and that, just exciting stuff. I can't wait to see it. So that's about it. I think I have gone on enough. So come check it out yourself. Follow it. Put yourself down for a pre-order. And I'll tell you what, though, just because you put yourself down for a pre-order doesn't mean it's coming out right away. I hate to say it, but Panzer has a history of getting delayed often. So, put yourself down for a pre-order. Give yourself plenty of time to save up some cash. Purchase it when they decide to charge the cards, and then enjoy the game when it comes out. I think it's still going to be a while, but show some love, show some support. I know you won't be disappointed if you haven't bought into the series before. If you weren't a World War II fan, but you're a modern fan, you cannot go wrong with this. It is a great, great system, and I can't wait to see it updated. And I hope to find some players around here that are into the modern stuff. And I hope that I can get cheap micro armor like I did when I was a kid, because nothing beats playing this game with little miniature Abrams and little miniature T-80s running around the battlefields of Germany. So look it up. Thanks for watching, and have a great night.